Testing, testing. Can you hear me? Testing, testing.
Are you gonna sign your? Double sign.
Played with a lot of guys that I played with 40 years ago that are doing the same stupid things they did 40 years ago now, but they're just out there for the sunshine and the beer. But I like to try to get better.
Oh, how could you drink beer in the sunshine? Woo.
Oh,
Okay.
I don't know.
You want this copy that we didn't sign, to have? the
Yeah.
girls? I'm trying to get rid of paper in my life
Yep.
this year, so. I'll give you my copy. I do have so. Good luck. And, these were already approved, so I don't need to make a motion to approve them, these transfers, these couple of transfers.
Well,
in the list.
well, you don't have to make a motion if you guys are all okay with them.
Yeah,
I'll write
okay,
that into
so
the
we-
minutes,
we
but,
already-
Okay. Thank you.
but so this is, to be clear though, this is a different set of transfers, so from
I
last
thought we
time.
Discussed this, it's not on the minutes, I thought we discussed this one and the other one, the $3,000 for IT support.
Yes, it was here. On the 13th.
Right, and then, the ambulance.
2039,
2039.
yeah.
Well, that's today's agenda. I'm just making sure you know this is a new,
Mm.
this isn't something we brought up at
I've
the
already
last
done it,
meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm aware of it. Why is Kathy Hudson still on here?
The appointing committee has to get rid of her.
Yes.
That's the way the bylaws are set up, so.
And
Yeah.
they don't know that, or they're
She's
not?
No, it's just that, the appointing committee only really convenes when there's a
Oh.
new person to appoint to this committee.
Oh, okay.
And so, there just hasn't been any reason to convene,
Got
so. We do have somebody who's potentially interested,
Oh,
so
good,
see,
good, good. So then she'll go. She'll convene. Kathy was here very few meetings. I think it was not for.
we just needed a body, we needed a body, that was the,
Am I
Yeah.
crazy? Did you say she's coming back?
No.
No.
Oh,
No, I asked
her if she was still on here.
okay, so we did,
I saw it in two places on the transfer, right?
yeah, so there's,
That's what we talked about.
yeah, take a look.
All right. I thought we talked about it, but okay.
There were a bunch of them we did talk about.
We had talked about the ambulance, but I don't think there was a number.
Yeah, so,
Well, no, that's a different ambulance. That's the big piece that they asked the selectmen for that we didn't agree on.
no, so let's
Okay,
back
go
up
ahead.
here. I'll talk through the transfers. Yeah. So, the Hilltown Community Ambulance one, so essentially, I think I may have mentioned this at our last meeting. They had some wrangling with the state and eventually it came down that even though they're nonprofit, they are still subject to this non-public ambulance trust fund assessment that the state has implemented. And that assessment is based on, certain number of calls to Medicaid patients, et cetera. The formula is a little bit complex. Suffice to say, it changes year to year. So this year, this is actually for FY '22, in fact, so the previous fiscal year. They've been able to give us the first 2 quarters. We won't get the bill for the next 2 quarters until next year. So we're gonna deal with that in the next fiscal year. But it's a little over $2,000 this year. And so moving forward, looks like we're gonna have to budget for that. Because, and we don't exactly know what it's gonna be. It's a formula again, based on calls. So obviously, since we've already expended our entire budget for Hilltown Community Ambulance, because the last of the quarterly payments already occurred, we're requesting this reserve fund transfer. So that's that one. And then the other one is just for IT. So our IT line item is always tight. This year, Windows is basically requiring a bunch of security upgrades. And so there were a few things that we didn't anticipate that we have to, Novus Insight, our IT company, had to, get for us mid-year. So this reserve fund transfer is basically just to get us through to past the end of the month. So, they're not banging down our door for invoices. And then we'll be able to do year-end transfers starting May 1st and
Okay.
get that tied up.
That sounds fair. Good with that.
Now you signed here and I
Yep.
signed there.
Yep.
We can have that one.
Okay, great. Yeah, and these have to be submitted in triplicate, so I think I need,
Now, you're
I
signing
can make
this
3
one?
copies of this, but
Oh, okay.
Oh, you can have
signed
mine
this-
back. I don't think I'll send, or no.
You're signing this one because you're the office.
yes, I should sign that one, yeah.
That one I signed. Now I can give you back.
But no, go ahead and sign these so he doesn't have to make any copies.
Oh,
Because like
oh,
you, I'd
okay.
really like to get rid of some paper. Because he needs 3 copies.
I'm really.
Yeah,
I'm really-
Exactly.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I printed out 3, so for each.
Oh,
That was supposed to be Chris, and I just thought.
You'd have to sign this one too, that'll make 3.
So the accountant's office is open, so somebody took that position?
No, it's just Lynn Kane, our new assistant treasurer collector, occasionally has to go in there and get stuff, so that's why it's open.
is she here today?
She is, yeah.
Oh, I'd love to meet her.
Yeah, you should stop by. Yeah. I think she's about to enter her golf season hours, so she, well, she'll,
Let's have like a 30-day.
I like her already.
yeah, so she'll be, I think she's leaving at 4 today, but if you stop in, yeah.
Done by then?
Yeah. No, we should be done well before then, I'm hoping, so.
Did they actually started putting the greenhouses at Bellflower yet this spring?
They have 1 greenhouse in.
Wow.
I will say there's some issues with that they need to address with our planning board and our conservation commission. There's basically there's a number of trees surrounding,
Yeah.
you know, exactly. Yeah. So, and the planning board, there's some other issues that they need to address based on what their special permit said they could do. So we'll see. They're, they're moving forward in fits and starts at this point. All right, so these are all good.
There you go.
Yes, yep. Okay. All right, do we want to jump back into this budget? Or we could even take a look at the, if we want to start, we could take a look at the Collins Center recommendations there. So I mentioned in my email, I think late last week, that I was hoping to get from Sarah a report on the number of hours for some of the folks whose hours vary. So that's our custodian, transfer station agents, and a couple other people. Haven't gotten that yet, but I can plug that in once we have that and budget accordingly. And then the other thing I would note on there is there are certain positions that there was no market average that the Collins Center got, just because those positions, might not exist in other towns or exist in so few that they didn't feel comfortable putting an average in there. But so for the most part, you'll see on the left, current appropriation for that position, and then, the low, mid-range and high range of their recommendations. And then on the far right, there is the market average that the Collins Center looked at.
I was surprised some of the towns they used for comparisons.
What did they use?
Well, there's a whole list of them.
Yep.
But some of them,
Are much larger than us?
well, like they got Whately on it.
Right.
Whately's got tons of businesses in town. We have,
Mhm.
they got Monterey. They have Sheffield.
Oh.
Which are,
Yeah.
The rich towns.
well, they're right in the corner of Mass where the New York people
Yeah. the
have their
rich towns.
summer
Right,
homes.
no, I know it's.
So, Their demographics are significantly different than ours. But some of them, like they use Montgomery, New Marlboro, Otis, a lot of them were similar here. Washington.
Oh, this isn't.
Well, they got the summer people, but
Yeah.
West Stockbridge is out in the Berkshires where the
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I know when we first discussed the findings from this, people pointed that out, like a lot of these communities are pretty different from ours, but it's difficult to find,
Well, when
apples to
you're in
apples
Boston
for
with the
sure.
West.
Yeah.
They look very similar.
Sure, yeah. Well, and the other thing is, I think, a lot of communities that we might think of more as our peers probably a lot harder to get this kind of data from, to be frank, you know, so.
Yeah.
So, but I think, you know, the other thing to point out is, this is based on 2021 wages and salaries. And now we're in 2023. So there's been a little bit of time for us to kind of catch up maybe. In that, you know, even if what they were recommending back in 2021 seemed high, now it might seem, okay, actually, that's a little bit more in line with what people's expectations are, given given inflation, et cetera. So I outlined kind of the range on there, and then the budget document, the updated kind of recommendations from myself that I sent over, for the most part, moved people to kind of the middle of that range. I think there are a few important exceptions, and I want to touch on those. To me, the most, let me see here. I'm going to pull it up actually.
Now, is your intent to move the low people up? And what about people that are making more?
Yeah, so that's a question we have to ask, right? I didn't see too many who were already above the range. You know, I think initially our assistant treasurer collector before Lynn got here was above the range, for example. She's since moved to the water department, and it's a different situation now. But yeah, for the most part, what I was looking at is, okay, if you're below the range, can we put you within the range? And then if you're already close to the top of the range, you know, do like a 2 1/4 or something like that, so that, you know, there is some compensation for changes in cost of living, but, you know, you're already within the range. So yeah,
Because some of these
that makes
people, like the
sense.
library director, she already asked for a raise
Mhm.
and for a little bit of increased hours. So, I mean, her current appropriation is 29.5. And the mid-range is 41,000. I mean, that's
Extreme.
that's way more than what she even asked for. So,
Right. And so that was one of the
I mean,
positions.
Yeah, but that's question catch up. Not catch up, like catch up, you know, it's like.
Yeah, so my recommendation with her would be to put her at the low end of the range, and with her increased hours to 28 hours a week. Now, you know, again, we could change that up in terms of hours. I want to try to get people within that range because, you know, we went and did a whole study and I don't want to throw everything out the window, but
study is just a suggestion.
it's true. It's true.
It's not
Yeah.
saying you have to do this, it's just something. for
Absolutely.
us
It's
to
another tool for us to use when we're determining these
look
kind
at.
of
That
things.
doesn't mean
Yeah.
we have to change anything,
Right. Yeah.
you know, it just is a tool to look at and say, this is what other people are doing and this is what our library is
Right.
and do we think that needs to change? It's not, we did the report, now we have to change everything or the
Right,
Because it
right,
was
right.
grant money,
Exactly.
it was free. So I mean, that's how I would look at it. And like I said before, to me, we're trying to get the most that we can from the lease. And not to cheat the librarian, but I mean, she kind of knew the deal when she came and knew what the pay was.
Right. I always see it from the like retention perspective because I know how much time we spend just trying to hire people. Yeah. But I absolutely see your perspective there. So let's talk about the library because there's the director's budget, and then of course there's the techs, and then also the archivist to some extent, though now he's going to be going down to I think 4 hours. So he's pretty much it's very little at this point. So for the techs, what I was recommending was because they're not actually, I think, within the range that was recommended by the Collins Center. I was looking at bringing them to 24 hours, which I think Nicole had suggested 36 hours. But anyway, this is a point of discussion. We can decide whether or not we'd rather, increase their pay and, keep their hours the same. I certainly want to some extent, defer to Nicole in that she knows the day-to-day operations of the library. But, we also want to make sure that that line item, I tried to keep it relatively close to what it was last year overall. So I want to make sure it's not exploding or the opposite.
For the next 15 now.
Yeah, so, yeah, let me just.
Across the
check
board,
on
I'm
here.
confused by that.
Because.
Minimum, maximum, and mid is all the same.
Yeah, because so with that,
Because the
they're,
Collins Center probably didn't have a recommendation.
they didn't have a recommendation for that one, yeah.
And they say that in the report that there were some places that just didn't have.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but their major recommendation with the text is having two people there at all times.
Mhm.
Because that was something that I spearheaded, because I said, with the fact that they have no rear exit and the fact that there's security issues there, we need two people there all the time. Because most of the time we had one person, that was it. So that's why it looks a little weird, 20 hours, but that's 20 hours for two people.
Yeah,
Right, this
So they're
for-
just two texts? Is that what we're saying?
no, there's multiple texts, but that you're saying that they're,
Right, but they-
two at a time,
two in
yeah.
the Actual
Yeah.
building, because it's just not secure.
Well, what did she ask for pay for that?
so she asked for, let me just pull this up, give me a second. I want to say it was 1534, but let me just confirm that. Because, yeah, what I was recommending is we go with her requested amount, given that there isn't any kind of recommendation from the Collins Center on it. But then we don't necessarily go all the way up to 36 hours. That seemed like it was quite a jump in hours. It was 20 to 36.
Per person.
Just for the pool of texts. So there are 36 hours of,
They're only open, what,
yep.
24 hours?
Yeah.
It's not much.
I know they're required to be open at least 24 hours, but I think it's up to 26 or
Right.
28.
yeah, so her let's see, yeah, her request was 1534.
Which is just the 2.25% we're giving everybody. Or last year's, that's the amount that we used
Yeah.
for everybody. And I think in general, we asked for that again this year.
Right.
To be paid, I guess.
So and then what I would just point out, so, my recommendation again is bring the library director up to 28 hours a week and bring her up to the low end of that range. Bring the techs up to the requested amount from the library, so 1534 an hour, but only 24 hours a week, not the full 36. And that would mean that, the overall library salaries line item changes from a little bit more, roughly $58,000 to $60,000. So to me, it's a reasonable increase to the overall salary line item.
So you're cutting the tax to pay her more.
Well, actually, they are cutting their archivist. So their archivist is going down to 4 hours. So
What was it?
he was at, let me see what his number is. Yeah, so he was at 1613. Nicole requested that he go to 1650, but of course his hours are going from 16 hours a week down to 4 hours. So that to me is where there's kind of a lot of savings.
Right, but when he starts doing something else, and she wants another archivist, she come in and say, we need it for 16 hours.
Well, yeah, we might have to have that conversation. It's true.
Yeah. And once you give people raises, you can't take it back, so. So what does she get per hour now?
Yeah, her current per
26.
hours, well, so she has 26 hours a week at 21.38 per hour.
And what do you want to give her per hour?
You
So
said minimum, so
it's a minimum,
26.
yeah, 26.
So the 2138 is her requested, or is that what she got last year?
2138 is what she got last year.
You want to go to 26?
What she requests this year.
She only requested 2186. And again, this is, you know, part of,
21% pay raise.
yeah, so again, this is part of my approach of let's try and do what we can with the Collins Center recommendations. Obviously, they're just recommendations, so we can change that. But I would like to try and maintain some consistency across the board.
And I remember when she was here and she requested it, she said their circulation is way up, so.
Now, the other piece with their budget to remember is that their state aid is somewhat contingent on something called the municipal appropriation requirement. So over 3 years, they need to show an average of 2.5% increase.
Right.
So that kind of, we always have to be aware of that, even when, if we think like we'd like to cut something, you know, if they end up losing their state aid, that would be not a good situation. So just something to be aware of.
I'm fine bringing her to that salary minimum, absolutely. As I said before, that's an embarrassment for her. Burger King makes $15.
Kevin's smiling, so
I'm
he's got a
just
different perspective.
I'm just laughing because she had a job at Gateway in public education in a union under a contract with all these benefits, and she gave it up by choice to come here.
Wow.
So we can give her a raise, but just understand that she chose that at that pay raise. So don't feel bad for her because she
No, I
made
don't
that
feel bad
decision.
for
Yeah,
her at all.
yeah.
No, I just
Yeah.
think she's doing a great job.
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually what you're saying.
Yeah.
Makes me more in favor of giving her more. Because yeah, lots of people don't leave those kind of positions, but
Well, like, again, it was her choice to
absolutely,
take a
yep.
effectively a part-time job
Mhm.
at lower pay. We can give her a raise. I don't.
Jen?
Well, as far as the libraries go, I think that at those hours per week, as far as the director goes,
Mhm.
the only thing is I don't see what you requested. It's not on here, right?
Yeah, so she requested in terms of her pay rate, 2186. And also proposed going to 28 hours a week. Now, again, if we think that she doesn't need those extra 2 hours a week, that's something we could look at and say, hey, I think we're good at 26 hours.
No, I'm fine
Um,
with it, but what do my team members think? I mean, it's one of those theories I have is if you have to file a report for $1 versus $1,000, it's the same report. Well, I realize that we're a small town, but now with circulation being CW Mars circulation for the whole western part of the state, it increases that one function has to be done for a lot more. So I suggest that we give her the 28 hours, because that must be how long the library is open, so she would be there, I mean, theoretically, for 28 hours at $26 an hour. And that comes out to, oh, no, 26, that's what she's getting now.
No, that's the minimum
Right.
recommendation from the Collins
Okay.
Center. She's making closer to 2138 right now.
Mathematically, that's what it comes out to. 28 times 28.
Her annual amount, if we went with the 28 hours at the Collins Center minimum amount, would be
How many hours does she work?
26,
But she wants 28.
correct?
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. So it's 728 a week. That'd be 37.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I would either say do it for a little less money per hour or cut the hours a little bit. I mean, from 29 to 37,000, when she's not even asking for it,
Yeah,
is,
I hear you.
you know, 27.5%
well-
raise.
What we signed on with the Collins Center to try and get in line with everybody else.
Mm,
And we just, I mean, that's what we're talking about. She's badly underpaid. And I know you have a little thing with Gateway.
No,
No, yeah,
She did, but. that
she
has
didn't come
nothing to
here and
do
go,
with
oh
this,
crap, this
though.
is what it pays. She chose to take the job.
Right, and I think the library trustees are overseeing this whole process, this budget process, and I don't think they'd allow her to go to 37. They would say it was too much. I say that, because isn't that the minimum suggested, 37?
Yes,
No,
with the
not
extra 2
37.
hours.
For
Right.
$26 times 28 hours times 52 weeks is 37 and change.
Right.
That's
Which
a
is
big jump.
$8,000
But then it has to do also with the hour change.
Right.
So,
Minimum
okay,
wage.
can I figure out what has to do with hour change, what happens?
So,
Yeah,
so
so
if you did
regularly
20, so
35.
if you did $24 times 28 hours times 52, you're at 34,944.
Mhm.
That would, to me, would be
Right.
still a lot, but it's a reasonable.
Plus, as far as calculations go, I think you should stay with the number of hours and use the hourly rate as the variable that you play with. You know what I'm saying? In other words, you say you could reduce her hours, but I think that in order to.
Oh, I was just saying we could keep her hours level at 26. And, and yeah, I'm just presenting options for what you could do to,
Right, right.
reduce
Now,
the
you see,
amount of
I think
increase.
that those options, you
Yeah.
keep the time, keep the 28 hours.
Okay,
And play with the hourly rate.
So if you did 24, so 24 times how many hours?
28, yep.
The new requested hours is 672 a week times 52 is 34,944.
one second.
Right. And they're getting rid of the archivist. And how about the text, or the text?
So again, the
wireless
texts
and line?
aren't exactly addressed in that Collins Center report. If we wanted, I'll say, so like the bottom of all wages that they recommend is 16 an hour. Under her request, it was only 15.34 an hour. If we wanted instead bring them up to 16 and, not increase Nicole's salary to the point where she's within that range, that's another option.
Right, well, this, again, I think that no matter what we do, we have to clear this with the trustees.
Do they have the final say?
Well,
Yeah, they do.
Board of-
kinda.
Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
Yeah, Board of Selectmen, not
right.
the trustees.
Well, as far as the library goes, the library is a little bit like the water department, but not quite.
yeah, but I don't know if they're gonna, if we were to say, hey, we're giving her a raise by $8,000, I'm not sure they would have a problem with that.
They say make it that.
I think, tonight, I mean, you're talking,
Well, I mean, if we do this at $24 with 28, that gives her $5,000 raise,
right,
which is
That's-
still a lot,
it is a lot.
but she does a lot. And
No, she does.
I would rather give her a raise than the tax.
Well, I thought maybe spread it out a little bit. And all I'm saying, see what the chairman of the board of trustees, Mary Cronholm, thinks. And
I can
she's
tell you what
very,
she-
huh?
Give her
Double her pay.
everything you can, yes. Yeah, I don't think, I really don't think we should be thinking of We have to make a stand and then the select board, they decide from there.
Right, we
They're the
make a
final say.
recommendation and they can fight it out.
Yeah, trustees are fine with, all the.
So,
books and
so
that
I'll
kind of
just point
stuff,
out, so if we do that, I'm not saying,
If we do what?
if we go with the 24
Mhm.
hours, or excuse me, $24 an hour, 28 hours a week. Overall, with the text at that 15.34 an hour, 24 hours a week, then we would be decreasing that salary line item by $1,000.
Mhm.
So, which again,
Which
it
salary
is
line item?
the whole library salary
including
line,
The archivist. whose
Right.
hours-
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, the total.
which again, that might be fine, but I always have to point out over a 3-year span, if we don't meet that 2.5% increase for that budget,
Right.
then they lose their state aid. So that's,
Yeah, let that happen.
Right,
Well, what he's saying is you gotta know that next year you're going up again.
Well, that's normal.
Yeah.
Should be normal.
so,
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with increasing her to 24. She works hard and she wants the extra hours and I'm sure she'll use them for constructive reason. But the tax, I wouldn't increase. I mean, I'd do what she had asked for.
the requested amount, yeah.
Yeah,
all
Yeah.
right.
but I
So
wouldn't go above
we
that.
need to make a motion to change what we have recommended for.
Well, I'm just presenting my recommendations and you as a committee are talking them through. And then at the end of this, we'll, present the budget that you want to take to the select board.
Okay,
But so I don't think you need to make a motion on each individual line.
But you're making notes and all.
I am making notes on all of that. I've got a spreadsheet that is FinCom recommendations. And it's being updated, so.
I mean, that seems fair to me. I mean, it's a big raise, but
again, they're catching up because it wasn't anywhere near that for years. I mean, it's been a long time since I worked there, but I remember going to the trustees and the mayor and saying, you gotta pay people. You can't not give them a raise, because they weren't even getting 1.5%.
And then so the other part of their budget, of course, is they have to budget 20% for materials. So let me just do that calculation really quick because based on the change in salary, that'll change too. So let's see.
Right.
Yeah, so that's gonna bring them down a little bit. I have a formula issue here, so I'll have to get back to you on that one. But yeah, so currently they have about 17,000 budgeted for materials because that's 20% of their current appropriation. And this will this will bring them down below that.
well, it'll decrease
Yeah.
it because the total will go down.
20, yeah,
So
yeah.
it'll decrease it by 20%, whatever we decrease it,
Right, yeah,
which was 1,000, so it decreases it by
roughly.
$200.
And basically, the decrease is coming from the archivist,
Right.
that is
Right.
not gonna be there anymore.
Right, for the most part, you'll
Right.
have 4 hours a week. So,
And,
Okay.
well, she can do the archiving now. She's.
Right,
good.
right, because they both been trained in it.
All right. So
So-
are we all agreed on that?
Yes,
Okay.
Wait a minute, what's the final?
Well, we're gonna go to
That what?
$24 an hour
24?
for her at 28 hours.
right,
Okay, yep,
And then do the recommended that she had asked for the tax. And we're getting rid of the archivist. That'll bring the total budget down by,
to 57 about,
yeah, so for her total,
and bring it all down.
right, yeah, because, give me 1 sec. Right, it'll go down by, like $1,000. So,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine. So we're just reallocating the money, basically,
Right.
okay? What department you want to go to next? Move
yeah,
on.
so well, maybe we'll just get the tough ones out of the way first. So highway superintendent. So currently Dave gets 65. He's nowhere close to that Collins Center range, but what I will say about that range is it's pretty far out of whack with the market average. So the market average, Dave's pretty close. The market average is about 67,000.
Mhm.
So my recommendation there would be to bring him up to 67. So $2,000 raise.
What was he last year, was 60?
He was, I'd have to check. Yeah, he might have been at 60. I wasn't here for his initial contract, so let me take a look.
Yeah, it's on your
Well, the
sheet.
current appropriation is at 65. That's what it says here.
Oh, it's not on there.
Well, so the salary, the highway salaries line item is, it's literally all of them together. It's 5 people in there, so it's,
Right, on that sheet. So
yeah.
You can't tell.
yeah, so
I thought that we had moved them to 65 for this year, for next year.
let me take a look at his contract.
So this current appropriation is what we talked about for next year?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm just trying to pull up his,
That's what I thought, but maybe,
No, I think that's what they're getting right now.
I thought he went
Current
from 60 to
appropriation?
65.
when.
Well, I thought that he was at 60 and he had asked, and we're gonna put him at 65.
No, so he's already at 65.
Okay.
He's
Current
at 65.
appropriation
And what did we
Yeah.
say we're gonna give him next year when we talked about it in here before?
I can't remember if we actually landed on
Yeah,
number.
what do you want to put him to?
So I was gonna suggest 67 because that is in line with the market average.
Yeah.
Let me look at what
It's 3%.
so that's better than a 2 1/4, but it's, again, it's in line with where the market's at.
So that highway salaries includes him, the 267.
Yeah,
Okay, so that'll go up.
may go up slightly, yes.
Luckily, they don't have materials in 20%.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about
And
that.
the other salaries are all negotiated, so we don't have to worry
Well,
about
it's
that.
Right.
union, right?
Right. So it's just his. And if he in fact was at 65 this year, I mean, I don't have a problem with giving him $2,000 raise. It's not a big deal, because we cut some other things out of his budget.
Right,
We cut the tree work and some other items that we lowered.
right. Well, out of his requested, he had
Right,
come
that's
in
what I
with-
mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So, okay, I'll make a note, Dave at 67.
is that right with you too?
Only because,
What do you think?
Deb, what's your objection?
You wanna go? Talk.
All year long, Jeff has been getting, all winter long, Jeff has been getting calls over and over and over of the work that his department is not doing. And he doesn't follow up on it, or even South Street. I mean, yeah, we should do that, but he doesn't do it. I will go with the minimum because it's minimum, but I just have to say, I don't really think he's working
think-
to his
I
full
think-
potential.
And what's
That
the
we're paying
minimum,
him
2
already.
1/4? Is that what you're supposed to do?
Well, that's what we've been working on, and I'm
Yeah,
okay with
yeah.
this, going up to 67. When I saw these minimum maximum, I was like, oh, absolutely not.
Yeah, and
So
so
But 67 would be okay.
66,
I mean, even his employees don't stand behind him.
only because also the previous superintendent made a lot more.
well, and I do wonder if this range that the Collins Center came up with had to do with the fact that Rainey was much better
Way-
compensated.
What did he get paid?
I'm sorry, what,
What did he get?
79?
He was up there.
For a 2-year commitment? What are we, crazy? We've been saying I'm only here
Well,
for 2 years.
we
My
didn't get
retirement.
the
One quarter is 66, 462.
I mean, that was a different situation. It was kind of
Yeah.
a forcing function.
I think, you know, with Dave,
It's not the way to run it.
with Dave, I'm trying to get better at giving him the support he needs in terms of seeking out grant funding and doing all that kind of stuff. I think he has a challenge in that he's still relatively new, and I'm new too. I sympathize with that. And he's got a bunch of young guys who need some pretty strong direction, and he's
They're
still,
not getting still.
he's still finding his feet in some ways. That's why I'm not suggesting like, yeah, let's give Dave like
That's
a
what I
huge
thought.
raise here, so yeah.
67 is okay,
Yeah.
74
Correct. Yeah,
Yes,
I
yes, that-
Just a little bit to give a little,
incentive, everybody's getting
And it's
2.25, he's
and
coming
then
up there.
also a really silly question. There's no more highway salary, a highway secretary.
No,
right?
no,
See, when I was working here, there was.
Right.
And she did a lot of grant work. I mean, a lot.
Yeah.
Even to the point of going to the place where the grant money was and picking up the check and putting it in the bank.
yeah, but you didn't have a town administrator. We didn't have Josh until
Well,
3
yeah,
years ago, 4 years ago.
Right,
So back then,
you're right, but.
yeah,
you know,
so I know, like, Angie came in like, what, 2017? And I think you guys off and on had a town administrator prior to that. But it's true, I mean, there's kind of no end to the amount of grants you could be seeking for that department, because there's so much to be done.
Yeah.
But again, I'm working with Dave on it. It's just, yeah. Yeah. The other
Alright.
part of this, of course, is like Chester just tried to hire a highway superintendent, and it took them like 6 months. So something to be aware of. There's not a lot of people who want that job.
Right, it's not, you think it's easy because it's a small town, but don't we have the largest mileage?
Well, yeah, if you ask
of-
John Hoppy, who is our custodian and is also highway super in Russell, he'll tell you, I took the job in Russell because they have 22 miles of roads, of town-owned roads, so it's manageable. Up here, we have over 60, so it's a lot.
Valley of Russell State Highway.
You're right, that's right.
All right. so
23.
65 to 67, so we're done with the highway superintendent.
Good.
All right,
And then, so the other ones, let's see, going back to the top of my spreadsheet here. So treasurer collector, that area. So for the last few years, the treasurer's salary line item has been blank, because we've been paying Sarah that out of the professional services line item in that same overall appropriation. Now that Sarah is going to be, not the treasurer collector anymore, theoretically in FY24, I was looking at putting the treasurer's salary at the middle of that Collins Center recommended range, so 24 hours a week. At, let's see, what did it end
did
up
you
being?
just hire someone for that?
Yeah, so we just hired the assistant treasurer collector, and she will be promoted to treasurer collector.
So we don't need this, because whatever you hired her for is this number.
Sorry, I need
Well, you have a
what?
treasurer salary,
Yeah,
and that's not Sarah because she's a consultant.
right.
So the person that you just hired, and however much you're paying her is what you just negotiated with her for this amount.
For assistant treasurer collector. But if she's moving to a treasurer collector position and Sarah's out of the picture, then she's got additional responsibilities, et cetera. And so
So the assistant treasurer you just hired is getting paid 36,828.
that's the appropriation for it.
That's the assistant treasurer tax collector. That's the
That's
whole
what
thing.
Yeah, well, that's the reality, is we're talking about public salaries here.
Yeah,
It's,
Okay.
Yeah, so the overall appropriation for assistant treasurer tax collector, because at the beginning of the year, we had a different person in that position,
Mhm.
is higher than actually what we're currently paying her,
Right,
because we negotiated a different,
on this spreadsheet, the treasurer's salary is this is just Collins data. We don't.
Right.
Have it broken out as the treasurer and the tax collector. One position. So the assistant treasurer tax collector is really more what we're working on. In other, you know what I'm saying? In other words,
Yeah, because we don't have a treasurer.
right,
Right.
right. So the point is that Sarah was getting as assistant treasurer tax collector like 100,000.
Not assistant, she's the treasurer collector.
Right. But the assistant's going up to the treasurer collector.
Right.
Right, so she's assuming that those responsibilities directly, there's no training, there's no,
Well-
she's going right into Sarah's shoes.
Well, yes and no, right? So the plan would be for July 1 for her to become treasurer collector. We are working on putting together an RFP for some level of support services, and that would probably mean if we end up switching to a new municipal finance software package, we'd have somebody to help train with that, training on Harper's payroll. And then, we're still trying to figure out, what other kind of support she might need for the first few months of the new fiscal year to make sure that she's, totally solid. So there might still be a little bit of money in that professional services line item that we're paying a consultant, and it would probably end up being Sarah to provide that support for those
Okay.
first few months.
Okay, because
And that's gonna happen this fiscal year?
That's,
It's
yeah.
coming.
So on the start of FY
So
24,
she's gonna go
Yeah.
from assistant to,
that's the plan. Yep.
she's gonna be an assistant for 3 months.
Well, we hired her, at the beginning of March. So, she'll have been assistant for 4 months or so at that point. Yep. And that's why we're also talking about having some
So-
kind of support still in place.
So
Oh,
when
yeah.
she moves to treasurer, there won't be an assistant,
Correct. We'll have to hire for that. So,
so there will be.
well, so this is a conversation, right? Like we have to figure out once she's in there, what level of support does she need internally?
Right. Because your numbers here are very different. You got assistant treasurer at 36,800, and then over here, you're looking at 18,000.
Right, because again, Karen, when she had that assistant treasurer collector position, was well above what the Collins Center was recommending for that position. I don't know how that happened, but that's just how it
Yeah.
was. So
And what is assistant treasurer collector, what's she make?
currently, she's at $24 an hour, 24 hours a week.
24 times 52, 29,952. 29,952. So she's,
see, the way I see it is the assistant treasurer tax collector
Mhm.
is more or less Sarah. Because it's gonna be the treasurer collector. Right? You're saying the assistant treasurer collector is going to become the treasurer collector
Yes,
next year.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So. And then she'll need support, you're
Right.
saying, but that's not, I don't think the support she needs, she needs support under her.
Yep.
For her responsibilities, but then she needs support otherwise of somebody, a go-to person like Sarah, who's experienced, you know what I'm saying?
well, that's
but
that's
that's not a salaried position here.
Right,
That's
right.
a consultant thing in the budget.
right.
It's separate.
Right.
That's
Right,
not
but you
this.
still gotta consider that, right?
Well, yeah, so overall, that, what I had proposed last time. Currently, that overall appropriation for the entire treasurer collector office is going from 205,000 down to about 160. And that's mostly because we'll no longer be paying Sarah's fee. Now, we of course have to budget accordingly in terms of health insurance, et cetera, for,
But that's something else altogether.
yeah. So I'm just trying to give you kind of context there.
So, my question is she still gonna get two treasurer clerks?
So that's another question is what level of support, because, we have 2 treasurer clerks right now. I'm not sure we really
need to.
especially if we do end up hiring an assistant treasurer collector for, in the range of, $24,000 a year or something.
Right, so the going from 205 to 160, does
Yeah.
that include 2 clerks or no?
Yeah, so that includes 2 clerks currently. So
Right,
I'm budgeting for the scenario in which we have the most staffed up office.
Right.
And it's still, again, it's still a significant drop from last year just because of, not having to pay Sarah all those consulting fees.
So July 1st, she'll become the treasurer. And
That's the
Sarah,
hope, yep.
and Sarah will be her help for a period of time. And then Sarah will be disappearing and an assistant treasurer will be coming into play. And then when you have the assistant, you'll probably only need 1 clerk. That's kind of
Right,
the
right.
scenario you're looking at.
Right.
going forward, Right, okay.
Okay, I see 3 clerks there.
So there's 2 clerks.
And then what's
Clerk
the
number
one above
2.
it?
Yeah, it's supposed to be,
Oh, one is-
yeah, it's not times 2, it's
Yeah.
clerk 2. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So what you're asking is what salary to set for July
Right.
1st, so when she becomes the treasurer.
Right, and I was
What you're
proposing, right, and I was proposing for her middle of the range recommended by the Collins Center. And for the assistant treasurer collector, I recommend the top of the range simply because we just tried to hire for that position. And it was excruciatingly difficult, the amount of money we were offering, and it ended up taking, 3 months.
Right. And I can't tell you how important it is. Because I believe we got into so much trouble because it was 2 different positions. It was treasurer and then tax collector. And the process and the procedures were just non-existent. Money on the floor, under the door. I mean, that wasn't her fault, but,
No, but that was a whole different environment.
Yeah.
right. Well, that's the thing.
That was
You
one
don't-
person in an office with no one else around
Right,
doing
but that's what
4
I'm saying.
jobs.
But you still don't want that to happen. And it can.
Yeah, it's an extremely important position.
So I would go with your recommendation of the 160. Which includes 2 clerks, but the 2 clerks will be assistant treasurer collector and 1 clerk. Just to be on the,
Right, so what I'm proposing here is, again, budgeting for a fully staffed up office where we have 2 clerks, 1 assistant treasurer collector, and a treasurer collector, and some level of support from a consultant. What actually ends up happening next year may, be 3 positions instead of that, or less even, just depending on what makes most sense for the office. But what I'm trying to budget for is if we really need to have all of that support. But again, it's just my recommendation. If you feel like, for example, if you feel like we can cut one of these clerks, or bring that assistant treasurer collector salary down a little bit, that's something we can look at.
But you're also bringing in a new computer system. Is that? for
Well,
sure?
So we're looking at our options right now in terms of, finances. Now, again, that's something that I would hope, if we put out an RFP, Sarah would respond and be good with helping train on that.
Mhm.
Because, she has team members who have worked with almost every imaginable municipal finance software system.
and she would be an outside consultant that she
Right.
bill as, so in other words, say something came up that the treasurer collector needs help with, like a project or some such thing, I don't know. And she would go to Sarah and say, I need help with this project, and then
Yeah.
Sarah would bill for that specific amount of time. So it's kind of hard to budget that, but
Well, we just, we
have
would
the
have.
money there in case.
Yeah, we'd have to work it out with Sarah, and I'm gonna have a conversation with our new assistant treasurer collector this afternoon about shaping that scope of work for the consultant. So I know exactly, where are the areas you need support in, and then we can see, okay, what are we expecting in terms of hours there?
And the
So,
request for proposals going out in March.
well, in April, yeah,
In
in
April.
April now, yeah, well, I'm trying to get them out shortly, but
Right,
it's,
okay.
yeah.
So what again is your
So let me give you a total in terms of salaries, because you're not including anything that we would be paying a, a consultant. So in terms of salaries total, I'm proposing about $100,000. Now that includes an assistant treasurer, a treasurer collector, an assistant treasurer collector, and 2 clerks.
Not 160? I thought you said 160.
Sorry, that is the overall appropriation for the entire department. So that,
included. So
yeah, that includes expenses, tax, title, legal fees, all that other stuff. Yep.
But again, what are you proposing for each employee?
Yes, so for the treasurer collector, I would be proposing middle of the range on the Collins Center, which is 38,000.
Mm-hmm.
For the assistant treasurer collector, I would be proposing top of the range, which is $24,700. And then for each of the clerks, I would again be recommending top of the range, $17,784.
Says here the top of the range is 14.
Yeah,
Let's see if I've got the. So I think I went with. Let's see.
The Monterey number.
I think, what I think it is I have 2 different hours plugged in here. So on here I have 15 hours, and on here on my spreadsheet I have 18. So I think this is because this is one of the positions I asked Sarah to please send me what are their average hours, because they vary a little bit.
Yeah, you got 15 there.
Yeah.
$18. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with that as long as the goal is to get rid of the consultant and just have
Right.
have somebody as an on-call. But if we're gonna keep paying her 60,000 and have all these people,
Right, yeah.
you know?
So I think,
And there'll be a transition. I'm sure there'll be a little overlap in
Yep.
there when everyone's going, oh my God.
so I think the other way we can kind of approach this is, it's because right now I have a placeholder of just 20,000 for kind of on-call consultant. I don't actually know, what number Sarah would come back with. It certainly can't be 90,000. But it may be more than 20,000. And if that's the case, then we can look at saying, okay, well, then we're only going to be doing this 1 clerk. Obviously we'll negotiate a bit with Sarah, but then also we'll look at those positions and where they are in the range, their hours, and if some of them we can do without.
Yeah. Yeah. So you think the mid-range for the treasurer, top of the range for the assistant,
Yes.
and you just hired someone and they, for 30, and she was the only person that applied, right?
She wasn't the only person, but it was a struggle to get 3. And one of them, I think, was just using us to leverage an offer from their current employer. So
You get so much free stuff.
I'm on board.
Right. And this is all gonna be plugged into your spreadsheet, right?
yeah. So the spreadsheet I sent you this week
Oh, it's
has,
on there
it
already?
has my recommendations.
Okay.
But are you saying you want like my detailed notes on
No,
all the?
Like when you went over the treasurer collector assistant and the 2 clerks.
Yep.
That's on there now, right?
Yes,
Okay.
correct, yep.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds reasonable. There'll be a little overlap as the transition happens. I mean, obviously, the goal is to get our people doing it and then have someone, if you have a problem, you get something weird come up, you can just call someone.
Right, exactly,
Right.
right. And I think,
And some of that support would come from the vendor when you're bringing in a new system.
Well, if it's a programming question, yeah, but if it's a
Yeah.
Right, I mean, the other-
functionality.
the other things, right, the other things I was kind of envisioning that a consultant would help out with is like major borrowings. If there's working with the financial advisors that needs to be done, she may be entirely capable of that, but having somebody there who's,
Well,
yeah,
Yeah,
a little more
so-
support, yeah. And then, there's the monthly reconciliation stuff, so,
I mean, the thing you don't want to do is inflate salaries to the point where when you do have to go out and get help, you're stuck.
Right.
You don't want to hire someone to do this and find out they can only do this.
sure.
Or we're paying them 40,000 and they're only capable of providing 30,000 work. But if she's making 29 and the salary for the treasurer is 38 for the other responsibility, I don't think that's a big change in pay.
And the payroll service and Sarah now do all the reporting, like to the state.
Yeah, I think they do, yeah.
Okay.
And she'll be doing that here.
'Cause
Right.
that's big.
Well, so this is gonna be part of the conversation is, is that something that a Sarah should do, or should we try to move that back in-house as well?
Do everything.
Right. Because I don't know if it's true, but the payroll service, they didn't do the reporting when I was here, but they may do it now. In other words, the quarterlies, you have to report to the state your payroll every quarter.
Yep.
So I'm assuming maybe they're doing it now.
They are, yeah.
They probably, yeah, I mean, they have the information.
They
of
weren't.
course, yeah.
No, they weren't when I was here for years.
How long ago were you here, Jen?
10 years ago?
Okay, so yeah, I think it's yours, I'm sure.
All right.
Well, not quite 10 years. It was 2015, 16, 17, 18.
So. Do we agree on that or not?
Yes.
Okay, so we're good. What else we got?
All right, so we did, the treasurer, fire department salary. So this is an interesting one. Quick update. So previously, when Chief Mater let us know he was gonna be departing, we had reached out to Chester about, maybe collaborating and having a joint fire chief. Back in December, they were not ready for that. And now they've kind of come back around and saying, oh, actually, maybe we would be. So I'm trying to set up a joint meeting with their select board and our select board. Currently, I'll tell you, we're pretty far apart in terms of compensation, in that they do not compensate a chief at all. Richie refused a salary every year he's been there. And so they have to create an appropriation for that position. Because it's really, for the most part, it's getting harder and harder to actually find people who will be a chief as a volunteer. And of course, we currently budget almost $23,000 for that position. So this is obviously it's a lot of moving pieces here, right? Because we're working with another town potentially, and we don't exactly know what the right level of hours for that is, and the per hour. So we have a recommendation from the Collins Center in terms of at least the wage per hour. I just want to make sure I got it on here. Because currently, yeah, they're at 26.
The minimum is 25, right? 25 or 26, I guess.
yeah.
Yeah, we're paying 23.
Right. And you recommend?
Well, so it's hard to make a recommendation here because again, we're working with another town and I'm not
But
sure
we're
exactly
we're
where they're.
potentially working with them.
Sure, yes. Yeah.
But in that
So
design, will he be a full-time employee?
No,
half there,
no.
half there, or still? the
Well, so
employee
this is a tricky thing,
working
right? Because the way that Chief Mater, when he suggested we do this, envisioned it was Leverett and Wendell have a similar situation. They share a fire chief, but the guy is hired separately by each town. And so for each town, he's working under that 19 hours a week, but cumulatively, he has almost a full-time position, but he just didn't need health insurance or anything. He's all set on that stuff. And a lot of these fire chiefs are. So that's potentially the arrangement we could have with Chester is, hey, we're each hiring the guy, but functionally he's getting the salary of.
that would be the best. one.
Would make
It would be
sense,
great
total
if we can,
sense,
if we
yeah.
can do it. Now I'll say our interim fire chief, Adam Dolby, has always said, we should be looking for even more towns and make this a truly regional fire chief position. And that would entail benefits, et cetera. And actually,
But that's like a 5-year plan.
that's down the road. This is a
So,
starter. Yeah.
so I think I like that where they split it out.
So what's your recommendation?
So my recommendation was to go with the bottom of the range because we're below the range entirely.
Mhm.
And based on the fact that Chester, they don't have any appropriation for their chief now. And when I asked them, well, what do you think you would be paying? And they came in quite low as well.
Lower than us.
Oh, yes, significantly. They were thinking, something like 7,000 a year.
For the fire chief?
Well,
That's the whole thing, and I
tell
don't
you,
know
my
if this is a
opinion, if we're gonna try to combine with Chester and pay half here and half there, I wouldn't even change the number. Why would you change it to 26?
Well, because, and I don't know if this is a conflict of interest, my husband's a volunteer fireman, and I know the calls they get now, I know they don't get a lot of burning buildings, but they get a lot of calls. And they really have a lot of volunteers who are great, and they've been there for a long time, but they need a leader. They need a leader. And if the fire chief is not here or whatever, it makes it difficult for people who have been with the fire department for a long time because they end up being the leader. And they really need a leader, I think.
A guy like the fellow that we have, who was a retired fire chief,
Yeah,
he was probably making 160 to 180 at East Hampton, and he
Right.
retired and got 80% of that. So whether we pay him 22 or 25 is not a life or death decision for that man.
well, I don't know.
That-
Yeah,
I'm not
the-
saying it's
the
difficult,
reason,
but-
so the reason I went with going, increasing it slightly to be within that Collins Center range is we did try to hire a fire chief by ourselves and we got nothing
Right. Mhm.
because, and what we kept hearing was that's just not enough money for, for the pain in the ass that being a fire chief is, which some days it is
Oh,
it's probably unbelievable. So,
Yeah.
now the other thing I would say is what I saw with Chief Mater was really great was he knew how to go after grants. And that's a huge benefit to the town. If we're not paying for new, breathing apparatus or something like that, because he's found a grant, that's great. So I'd love to get somebody who could do something like that, but
So, like
I
you
think
said, when we went out for, request for proposal on the new fire chief, we got nothing, and it was down to like 22.
yeah,
Right.
it's around there. Yeah.
26 is not, it's still in the Collins Center, it's the low end of the range.
Right.
But I think that maybe it's definitely important that we consider that.
And I think with the stuff going on with Chester, we can't really wait for that.
Well, this is our other committee members here.
So,
The smart one came.
yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, it's true. We
We
may
gotta go
have
with
to,
what's now.
yes. Well, so we have an interim fire chief right now
Mhm.
and, Adam knows what he's doing, but he's got a full-time job and he's, so that's a reality. So anyway, so my recommendation is just bottom of the range from Collins Center. That may shift significantly if we have conversations with Chester and, it sounds like there's a candidate out there who wants to do it for a lot less. Well, that's,
Yeah.
so we have one guy who's expressed interest. The challenge I've seen with him is he's away pretty much every weekend in the warmer months of the year because he's a professional bass fisherman. Which it might be fine. Maybe that's the reality for these positions now. It's just a little tough to say. And then, as long as you have some kind of deputy person who can
Yeah.
be ready on the weekends. But also there are a lot of question marks for me because theoretically, if he was as solid as he makes himself out to be, he would be the fire chief right now in Chester, and he's not. So I'm
Where's he
hesitant.
from? Is he from?
Chester.
I'm can't recall if he's from there or actually if he lives here, so. But he works
So
for,
he is a local.
he's a local, yes, yep.
Local.
And he might be great. I don't know. I'm just, to me, there's been some question marks, so.
Well, again, though, we
Be willing to
can't.
take
base
the
our
22?
decision.
I think, yeah, I mean, it's true, it's true. So anyway, that's my recommendation, but if you have other thoughts, yeah, again, that's one where, you know, we're gonna have conversations with Chester and this could change a lot in a short period of time.
I'm agreeable to the minimum.
Right, me too.
Yeah, knowing that it may change down the road, but
Treasurer collector, now, are we discussing the selectman's secretary salary?
I don't think Kevin,
What's that?
did you?
Fire
agree?
chief?
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. It's kind of all up in the air. I mean, it's,
Right.
That's it,
Right.
but I think the
You know.
minimum is a good starting place at least.
Yeah,
For budgeting.
for select board, administrative assistant, I recommended just Collins Center, middle of the range.
Which is
21.
and who is that?
That's
That-
Joanne.
Joanne.
Yeah.
And how many hours does she work?
A billion.
She works usually 19 hours a week.
And what was her proposed salary for next year?
Well, she didn't make a request. So, you know, I'm happy to talk to her about what her request is. She's already, I will say, so she's already within the Collins Center range at this point.
So this is what she makes now.
Yes, yeah,
19, yeah. 20 maybe.
So if she got
Even in
2 and a
Northland,
quarter,
more.
should be at 20,000. 20,282.
right. So it's, we're not dealing with a huge difference here, one
Right.
way or another.
Right. And besides the fact that, again, I think this is a catch-up position because along a few, let's say 5 years ago, it was substantially lower.
Yeah.
And it just didn't. I think it's because it really was kind of two positions. Well, no, I remember there used to be somebody working up here as a select board salary, it was Kara, as a matter of fact. The select board secretary.
Right.
And she worked for the water department.
Right.
So,
So that's a 9.5% raise to go to the middle. Just
Right. So it's less than 2,000 a year.
right.
But- So I'm
I mean, it's
very,
not a big deal. You know
Yeah.
more than I do or what she does.
she does a lot.
And she seems to. Every time I walk in here, she
Right, because you're working with her.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm wondering is the 19 hours, is that like 2 days a week? Each like 10 hours a day? or-
She's
or is it
here,
every
she's
single
here,
day?
she's here Mondays from 10 until whenever the select board meeting ends.
Right,
So,
right, right. Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, well, hey, I'm here at 9 till whenever the select board meeting ends, so. But then, and then she's here Tuesdays, and then also Thursdays to process the warrants, so.
We gave her a larger raise last year, right?
We did,
To
and,
try and
and
bring her up to.
and part of that was that she had been doing a lot of the stuff that I'm doing for, you
um,
know, several months while there was no town administrator,
Mhm.
full-time town administrator here, it's just somebody had to pick up the slack. And I will say, you know, now that like I've been here a year, I've taken a lot of that stuff off her plate. So that could be a consideration in this as well. And again, to me, it's like 2 and a quarter versus the middle of the Collins Center range. It's not a massive difference.
Right, right. So I'm agreeable to that. Middle of the range.
Agreed.
That's fun.
And the water department.
Water departments. Oh dear, the water department. Oh,
It's kind of funny. They're their own little thing with all their own little money and we decide what they make.
Well, sort of.
Somebody's gotta tell them if they're being reasonable or not.
Well, I know, but
I mean,
it's
basically,
like their own little business.
right, it is, and that's the same with the broadband. Unless there is a different types of enterprise accounts, I'm sure there must be. I don't
No,
know.
they're both enterprise funds that, I
Right,
mean,
and
water
they're
obviously is,
handled the same.
yeah, water is obviously a lot older. And broadband is, we're just
Right.
getting to the point where they
Right.
have something that looks like the water budget.
Right,
So I put this on here, with the water department budget, to me, it's like, okay, are you guys doing things within your current rate structure? And, if not, or if in future years, you require a rate increase, given, normal cost escalation, then we give them some input.
Mm.
But for the most part, I'm a little bit more hands off with them.
Yeah. I mean, they're all in a reasonable range.
Right.
So. Except the water department superintendents get paid too much because the average salary is 28,000.
Yeah, looking at the market average there.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and I will say, it's a little bit of a special situation there. In that Gordon has some health problems, and so he also brings in this guy, Kevin Shea, as a consultant and pays him out of that line item to help out because, Gordon has to go to treatments, et cetera, sometimes.
So he pays them out of what line items?
That superintendent's salary, yeah.
Instead of paying himself.
Okay.
he's all right with that.
That's what Gordon proposed.
Right.
Because he was like, I'm gonna have to be,
Well, he couldn't
Yeah.
do it,
right,
couldn't do his job, so.
No, I know that,
Yeah.
but I mean, he's all right with, moving forward that way.
yeah, for the time being, that's what he came up with. So yeah, there wasn't too much that was exciting in these ones.
Yeah.
I will say, so with the operator, again, we're working with Chester on kind of making that into a joint position. And the way that's shaking out, and I guess it'll be, man, tonight we gotta deal with it.
Long day.
Yeah. Basically, I don't know if you guys have met Steve, he does he's our water labor, not operator. And he's gonna be, the idea would be he was split time between here and Chester. And that would allow him to basically get the number of hours required to reach the next licensing stage sooner than he otherwise could. So we're hoping he'll be able to basically take a faster ladder up into the operator position. And currently we have a primary and secondary operator who have, in my mind, long outstayed their welcome, but since the water department doesn't want to take any action on that, we'll just have to work on finding, a replacement, so that's, so that's what I had in terms of thoughts on salaries and wages. Again, I'm still waiting on some stuff from Sarah, so I'll send that over once I get that. Most of that, I don't think it's going to be too dramatic a change, and it's just about how much kind of squish we want, say in the transfer station salaries, are we, in case they have a big snowstorm and have to work additional hours, that kind of thing.
How do they work additional hours in a snowstorm?
So they end up, I think, plowing that and shoveling that space. Yeah, well,
Get it ready for 2 days later, they can do it.
I'm not sure it's even a plow thing. I think it might just be a shoveling thing, but I
No,
Yeah.
it's a whole road,
They have a snow blower. Well, the town plows the road,
right.
right.
but they have a
But
snow
remember when
blower that they
didn't do
clean
the
up around
library,
it.
And they didn't do the fire department the other day?
Yes, this was a conversation. This was a conversation. Yeah, this was a conversation with Dave because, and I feel bad for him in that, there were trees down on virtually every town-owned road, and so that was a struggle. But you're right, we had to talk like, hey, here's some town departments that are really need to be a priority because they're emergency services. So yeah, that's an ongoing conversation for sure.
They had a hard time on it. They plowed in from one way and they got just past our driveway and the snow just piled up in front of the truck and there were trees in it and everything. So I went out with my tractor and I moved all the trees and I called them up and said that I'd moved the stuff and they could come back with the tree limbs. He goes, oh, great, we'll be right over. And he sent the truck down, the F-350 with the big V thing. And he came and tried to plow and you could see the dent in the snowbank where the plow was or where the 4 tires
That was it.
done. Didn't have a chance. They had to bring the road grader up. But he was so excited. Oh, that's great. I'll be right over. And he, Nothing. My
Yeah.
truck will go right through it.
Yeah, that was some wild snow. That was.
Yeah, for sure.
I went around my whole neighborhood with my tractor and moved tree limbs out of the road. There are limbs right in front of people's houses,
Right.
Yeah.
blocking half the road, and they don't even walk down there and pull them out of the road. Right in front of their house. One guy has a track and he left the limb right in the road. So I went around the whole neighborhood. Took me an hour. I just pushed everything out of the road.
And you had fun.
I did.
Yeah.
Council beverages.
I'll have to see if there's some money for a stipend in the highway budget.
There you go.
So yeah, so that's those were my recommendations in terms of salaries, et cetera.
What?
Anyways, what did we decide about the water department?
I think it
Just-
was,
Leave it
As
where it
is.
is.
Everything as is, okay.
And then some other things that I mentioned in my email. So we had our meeting with the Hilltown Community Ambulance Association the other night. They were proposing, and I think I had, already explained this, but they pretty significant increase, just in terms of the base assessment that they have for us. So it's going from 33, or not even 33, 30,000 to over 40,000. And then on top of that, there's that non-public trust fund assessment. I'll tell you, there are a lot of different opinions about that organization and what the town should do. And I'm kind of waiting to hear a little bit from other communities, so Russell, Montgomery, et cetera. I
but
know-
when they sat down with the select board, I wasn't there. What was the reaction or any reaction?
Well, it was a muted reaction on our part in that, we don't necessarily have another option, right?
Well,
Not
but that's what
immediately.
I'm-
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Westfield.
What's your option?
Well, that's
Because-
right. There are those kinds of options. Now, I don't know if Westfield is like champing at the bit to take us on as well. But
They may not be chomping at the bit, but would they do it? What would they charge? And does that build the people's insurance instead of the town?
that's, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be something I'd look into.
Yeah, again, there are a lot of different
Yeah.
opinions and a lot of different options out there. Well, there aren't a lot of options, unfortunately, but there are some
Right.
different configurations, right? I'm certainly, I'm frustrated with Hilltown in that I don't think they ever give us nearly enough data on what they're doing and, how much they're paying all their employees and all of that kind of stuff. And then, we have this issue, for example, with our firefighter who got, they transported him after a car fire and he had inhaled a lot of smoke and then we got a bill for it. And then, eventually it ended up going to collections because I gather that, the fire chief at the time thought he shouldn't have to pay it. And so we ended up in a situation where, they're going after us for money and I'm like, we already pay you guys $30,000 a year. Can you pick up the phone and call us and we'll like figure this out instead of, oh, it's going to collections and now it's
So what's the 34?
the 30,000
Just
just for providing service within the town,
for being ready.
just for
And then if you
providing
don't call,
service.
you pay more.
Well, so this is a question, right? Like, hey, we already pay you $30,000 a year. So why do we have to pay you anything else? So, yeah, that's it. Now, to me, it's like part of it is, we're subsidizing a service for our residents,
Mhm.
right? Because our residents actually pay relatively low rates for that. And we're also making sure that they can exist. Because if all the towns said, no, we're not paying you that assessment, they would be done. So
So we pay them how much a year?
30,000 right now,
30,000
and then what they're,
divided by 500 households.
They used to submit a rather lengthy document about where they spent their money, but I guess they kind of,
Was John Garapi here?
was he, oh, no, he wasn't at the meeting, no. No, it was Bailey, their new executive director, their board members, so Mary Ann Pease from Chester and what's his name from Worthington? Can't think of his name at the moment. And then their new CFO, this woman Jade Rice, was there as well. You know, I mean, it's yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. You know, I grew up in Westfield and lived up here for 23 years, and some of the things that the hill towns do, everybody wants to have their own little,
Fiefdom, yeah.
you know, it's like when they did this school thing, Blanford and Worthington held the district hostage and said, we don't have our own schools, we're voting this down. So they had all these little elementary schools all over, and now Blanford has City Hall to maintain, and Russell has a big school building.
Yeah.
And they do that with the fire department and all these ambulance, everything, everyone wants their own little, and they don't work together.
Yeah, it's a real struggle just to get people to understand we're all too small to not regionalize. We're just, it's, you know.
I mean, Russell, if you walk out the door and trip, you land in Russell. You know?
yeah, but yet their service is regionalized. I mean, they're serving all the hill towns,
Right, and I,
but the payment isn't.
well, so they have an assessment, per capita assessment for each town. Yeah.
Based on the residents.
Yeah, well, so what they were proposing, I think, was roughly a $35 per capita. And so because we only have 1,200, you know, our increase was a lot less than, say, you know, Huntington. But yeah, the other thing is, you know, they are talking about, you know, what they can do in the long term. They pointed out that just being a nonprofit in general is not a great situation, especially given these new assessments that the state is handing down. So in their kind of thinking is we would love to become one of these municipalities, and it's, you know, they're the host community and other communities, you know, pay into that or something like that. And I can see advantages and disadvantages there, but that's one thing they're thinking. And they are thinking a little bit about how they can kind of take away from Westfield the calls on the pike, because currently Westfield gets all the calls on the pike, and that really,
They got that exit right there, and they got an ambulance 300 feet from the.
Right.
turnpike.
right. Right.
Maybe that's cutting into our revenue.
Well, yes, but like Kevin's pointing out, I mean, it's Westfield kind of is the logical ambulance service to handle that. So,
They got a firehouse just past the thing around the right hand side. Right
Yeah.
there,
Okay, yeah.
right there.
yeah. And then, you know, I will say, like, another thing that was frustrating is, you know, Kara brought up very simple question. Do you guys have some kind of capital plan? Because, you know, you're telling us about aging ambulances, you're telling us about a facility that's really not up to standard. So what's the plan? And it was kind of like, well, we don't have a crystal ball, which is, we're paying you guys $30,000 a year. You got to have a better answer than that. That's like, so that to me is like, okay, is Westfield interested? You know, like that, when I hear that kind of response, it's like,
Absolutely.
yeah. So
Where is
I mean, it'd be a
the house?
conversation to.
Huntington, so they were on right there at Bromley Road, like right before Gateway. You'll see like
you know,
a little,
Huntington Country Store is.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Left, right there.
Yep.
There's just before the country store on the left is Broadway Road.
Oh, that goes
If
off.
you turn
Okay,
left,
so it's
they're
right there.
right
Oh, okay.
outside. They got like, I think there's bushes, big hedges around. the
Yeah.
building, so,
Yeah, no, I know what you mean now.
I mean, that'd be a conversation to have in Westfield. Doesn't hurt to talk.
Yeah, I think,
You
I mean,
know?
the other thing we always run into, and this is with the school system too, is do we want to be the ones pulling our support when we're also, we try to be the ones who are always encouraging regionalization and collaboration and working together. So it's always tricky, you know?
Mike McCabe's the mayor down in Westfield, good friend of mine, tell him I told you.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the fiber. Doesn't hurt gas. That's how we got the fiber optic up here.
Right, Westfield Gas and Electric, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like there's one other thing I wanted to mention to you. Oh, what was it? Not insurance.
Voc
What's that?
Ed?
Voc Ed, yes. We got the number of applicants, at least, to our vocational schools from Gateway. And then we also got the rates for non-resident students from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So we now have a rough sense of what that should be. And it's an increase. And the exact number will depend on, there's one student who's not sure if they're going to, Smith Voc or to Westfield Academy. So it was a significant increase. So it was, I think, going from under 200,000 for this year up to 250. Yeah. Now, ultimately, student might not accept or something, we'll see, but we should be prepared to budget 250,000 for, because that would cover, I think it's now 12 students, and then you always want to have a little bit extra in case there's special ed, because those are like per hour costs essentially that get tacked on at the end of the year. So, yeah. So that's something that's out there. I'm waiting to hear back from our insurer, so Maya, they're really informal about it, which I always feel like insurers are really, it's just weirdly informal. Oh, 20,000, 60,000, yeah, whatever, that seems about right. But that just tells you the sums of money they're dealing with. They were saying a 2.25% increase from where we're at currently, which is pretty reasonable. So the exact number we'd budget for that depends on some credits that were owed. So they're going to send me the package basically next week, and we'll take a look at that, and I'll have a little bit more of a solid number to plug in here. So yeah, that's those were the changes on my end. Any other thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I have a question with the email you had sent.
Yes.
out.
Oh, the capital budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
$260 facility placeholder for fire.
Yep.
Highway. I'm confused by the whole process. I thought the town shut it down by saying no money.
There was a special town meeting vote. It can be voted again. And that's why I put a placeholder in
So you're
there.
just putting it out there in case we vote again to do it.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And why did we miss out on those grants?
So
Is there a
I don't know
reason?
the exact specifics because I wasn't here. I believe those are basically two things where probably Josh was heading them up, and then when he left, people didn't even realize that they were out there, and so I think that's what happened. Again, I wasn't here. So. But it's
That
it's
was a lot of money.
what's that?
It's your fault.
Yeah, yeah. You can string me up if you need somebody to, yeah, but yeah, so I think that's what happened, but I can't be sure because I wasn't here.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, and I was hoping that was it.
Our accountants, so I worked for the last year getting in touch with what is it, Elder Affairs, who does the SIG, what's called the SIG grant service incentive, and we said, what's the deal? I thought we could get the $17,000, and they said it's just stuff was not submitted on time, and we can't at this point. So unfortunately, I think at this point our accountants are just handle it out of free cash and stop allowing it to be deducted from your free cash every year, because that's just not a good idea. So yeah, so those are those, and those are, I know those are, it's not fun to
No,
talk about
no,
a town
no.
meeting, so. So to me, it's a great advertisement for the value of my job. As soon as the guy in my position walked away, oh, you left. Anyway.
When did you start?
March last year.
So a year ago.
Time flies, doesn't
Time
it?
flies. Any other questions on the capital
That's-
budget stuff?
that's all I
Those
was
were the,
looking at. Yep.
yeah,
So basically, I think you had said that you could finalize the proposal spreadsheet after you speak to Sarah.
yeah, I'm waiting on Sarah, our insurer, to get us that exact number. And then obviously, I think what I'd like to do is have basically our shared recommendation for the end of this month. And then in May, we could do this a couple ways, right? So there's the mini town meeting, which is May 22nd. And that's really when we're going over the entire warrant for town meeting, and kind of finalizing that budget then. So it might be a good idea to have at least one joint meeting with the select board and the finance committee prior to then, so we can identify if there are any areas where there's some distance or gaps.
At the end of May,
Well, I think this would be earlier, and I'm talking about a joint
the
meeting.
special town meeting at the end of May.
No, the
The 22nd is this.
is the mini town meeting, as it's
Right,
called.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Oh. Special town.
Yeah, it's a mini, we call it mini town meeting. It's not a town, because it's not a town meeting at all, actually. It's just in this room with, so yeah, I would think, a week prior or 2 weeks prior, we should have a joint meeting with the select board and go over everything and iron anything out, so.
2 weeks prior.
Yeah.
Can we just like do a ballpark date?
Yeah, well, so whatever that Monday is, let's see, hold on.
That's gonna be a problem, I guess. Playing golf league on Monday night.
Oh, okay, that's okay. You know what? Why don't we do this? Because I already have a meeting on Thursday, the 4th. I'm wondering, would you be open to,
I can't do that.
you can't do Thursday, the 4th? Okay, all right.
I mean, I could come, but I'd just be late. I'd be here. 6:30-ish, quarter stuff.
Okay, well, that's not too bad, because we'll have other business to attend to before we get into the budget
I
anyway.
mean, it's
So-
just that.
So we're talking
Yeah.
about May 4th?
Well, no, so are you talking about May 4th or Monday?
Mondays.
Monday, so let's plan on Monday, May 1st. Joint meeting with the select board. Beyond the budget, we will also want to do year-end transfers, because those require approval by the select board and the finance committee. And I will get you a list of those prior to May 1st.
And that's it. 6.
Yes, correct, yep.
Yeah, and I can find out who we're playing that night, because it's 2-man teams, so people, I can find out who we're playing. And ask them to be as early as they can.
Yeah.
Did you want us?
We'll
to
figure out ways to stall for you, Kevin, don't worry. Don't drive too fast.
They have their regular meeting anyway. right?
Correct,
They
yeah.
have
Select board
their-
is on Monday night.
So, that's the joint meeting with the select board. Did you want us to meet before that or no?
Yeah, so this is a question for the committee. Do we want to have one more meeting before April is out and go over those additional items, or Janet's shaking her head, so,
And
I-
you're gonna do another one of these.
correct, yeah,
It's gonna be all updated.
yeah,
Right,
So why don't you do that and get that?
right,
Sure.
right. And
And,
then we'll decide?
yeah,
Okay,
and
okay.
then we can look at it and we can see the different categories and
Right.
everything. And then, because a lot of these things went down
sure, yep,
and some of them went up, and
Right.
that way we could see the final result at the end. We could each look at it individually. If we don't have a problem,
See if it
we've already
balances,
discussed everything. So,
yeah,
if it balances, we're doing good.
yeah, So I don't.
It balances.
You know, it's balance.
Unless something weird
I
came
mean,
up.
That's what Excel is all about.
Unless we saw it.
No, that's great. That's great. So I will,
Yeah.
I'll send you guys the updated spreadsheet.
That'd be great.
I'll make some tweaks to that kind of letter I had provided that has the narrative, just so it has the updated numbers in it. And then, yeah, we'll schedule that meeting with the select board and be good to go.
Yeah.
So,
If people have questions, we could
Yeah.
just get a hold of you and say.
Yeah. Yeah.
We could meet.
Right, right, right.
20 minutes.
Right.
okay, that sounds good.
Sounds good, thank you.
Do you have anything else on the agenda? I don't have an agenda in front of me.
Let's see. Well, we did the transfers. right?
Great, yep,
Yeah, we did it.
We,
Yeah,
yeah.
great.
think
And I
so.
know I still owe you meeting minutes for March 6th. I just haven't had a minute for those, so.
Don't worry.
The other
Pretty
part of
accurate,
this,
so.
said in here, they reference another,
Oh, so they created job descriptions for basically all of the positions
Oh,
we
they did?
have. Yeah, and actually you are reminding me of something I did want to quickly discuss. Conservation agent. So Dick Gates had brought this up. You know, I said, well, I think the committee had said, yeah, we could maybe do $10,000 for something like that. We got you know, this funding through PVPC to look at a joint position with another town. I had one meeting with them, and actually initially it looked like it was going to be an amazing fit in that they needed somebody 14 hours a week. We only needed somebody like 5 hours a week, magically below 19 hours a week. And, you know, you get to hire somebody for a more attractive position than 5 hours a week. Unfortunately, they said, actually, now we're looking for 25 hours a week. And so it kind of is like, I don't think we want this to be a benefited position at this point, so we're just wading into it. So I talked to our conservation chair, and we reached out to DEP, and they pointed out there's a couple folks out there who actually might have some capacity to do like 5 hours a week. So what I'm suggesting is we put out a job posting for 5 hours. We've got 2 or 3 people we think might be interested. And then ultimately, I think we'd only end up having to budget like $7,000 or $8,000 for that position.
Yeah.
And we'll see, you know, in future years, maybe it changes a little bit, but that's, at least they get the support they need,
and it'd be
yeah.
an on-call thing, so, right?
Well, so we'd have to figure out exactly how it's structured. Probably a lot of what Dick needs them to do is just paperwork, you know, filings on, you know, wetlands violations and all that kind of fun stuff. So they don't have to be in Blandford for that necessarily. But then there's other work about monitoring certain sites that they would have to, of course, be here. So,
There was a woman who came into the bank all the time, Heather Comey, CEO.
oh, it sounds familiar.
And she lives in Chester,
Uh-huh.
and that's what she does. She works out of her house. And she does environmental stuff for construction and contractors and all that. She's very nice. Her husband's family owns Comey Concrete in Agawam.
Oh, okay, maybe that's why I'm like,
Yeah.
that name sounds really familiar.
CLFEE, they live on River Road in Chester up past Dayville. And I don't,
Oh, yeah, Heather Comey, wetland consultant.
you see him?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But she might be somebody that, and you could mention my name, I know her very well, you can mention my name and,
Yeah, that's great to know. Yeah.
yeah, she was relatively young and energetic and a bright person that would be somebody that would be good to work with.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. And Dick had identified, so there's a young guy out of Westfield State who is in Beckett and Southampton now. And he said he was very impressed with him. And also, great thing is he's got a year of experience with these municipalities at this point. But he's another potential person. And then there's, I think, a third who DEP mentioned who is up in there. So there's some
For
options.
somebody else,
Uh-huh.
and then the person just retired, so she just took over all
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Interesting.
took it over.
Yeah, good to know.
Someone else talked to.
Yeah, great. All right. Anything else? So we'll convene again on May 1st. We'll, you know, buy Kevin some time while he's coming up from his
Yeah.
golf game.
I'll keep you posted.
Okay.
I'll talk to Mike. We're gonna start, I think, the week before,
Uh-huh.
so I can find out who the other team is, and I'll just tell them to be there 4 o'clock. It will be done by 5:45, 6 o'clock.
Okay.
An interesting thing that I learned, actually two things.
Uh-huh.
My daughter, not pertaining to business at all here, but my daughter writes the innovation newsletter online for the Boston Business Journal. And a lot of those